Okay, so I'm going to do a reply to this, and I'm not planning this whole thing, or I could turn it into a 4 hour show. And I'm not turning this into no 4 hour show. So, but what I want to talk about is at the very beginning, and this is channel's Truth Media. Now, I understand Truth Media is an employee of the establishment. Okay, I don't have no doubts about that. But that's not the point. The point is they tell a lot of truth as well. And it's the truth that I'm interested in, not the propaganda. And this is a topic that How by the Dashboard Light has talked about, that Mr. Hoke has talked about, and that I've briefly talked about. And so, yeah, I think there's some stuff missing from the equation here. And I think y'all know what that is. It's the big white elephant in the room. Somehow it's been left out of this. Go figure, huh? So let's play this part and let's add the big elephant, white elephant in the room to it, because they're leaving that part out like always.
This has come up a lot, but we saw this specifically in the New York Times while we were traveling. They're openly acknowledging and admitting that China is facing a demographic crisis and that there is indeed, quote, a global fertility crisis that is underway.
That's right. See here the topic.
And, after more than a decade of studying eugenics and following these issues and trying to really understand what's underneath them and what it really means under the propaganda, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised, but it seems
I was.
significant for the New York Times to acknowledge it on page one. And yes, it was an op ed, but they openly just talked about what a mistake it all was with China's one child policy,
Mistake.
the overpopulation bomb crisis. And these are all corollaries to the ongoing environmental crisis that is currently being propagandized about. So it seems
Yeah, he'll go into the environmental thing, and we're not going to go into that in this part of my video, but I will leave the link to this video and to their channel underneath, okay, in the more section for you. So anybody that wants to come and watch this entire thing can. And I would think it should, because they do put a lot of truth here, and they are linking it right into the environmental and the global warming and the on and on. But I'm not interested in that part, so let's go on.
significant. So it's this op ed by Ross Douthat that we saw. I mean, go ahead and read him some passages.
Yeah, I just really quickly want to mention just because they slap the word opinion on something, when you print this on the cover, the front page of the New York Times, that's promoting that viewpoint. They can try to distance themselves by using the word opinion, but that doesn't mean anything. It's on the front page of the New York Times. So this is titled China Faces a Population Crisis Anew, and when we saw it, we were just pretty blown away because this comes after decades of this same publication and other mainstream publications that are held supposedly up as this grand standard of media promoting the exact opposite belief that the world is overpopulated, there's going to be a population bomb, the world is just going to fall out of space, I guess, with the weight of all the people and everything. And now they're just admitting that all of that was wrong and they're trying to act like it was all just a mistake. So we're going to read this to you and discuss it because it's pretty mind-blowing. It says, in recent days, both this newspaper and the Wall Street Journal have carried reports on one of the most important geopolitical facts of the 21st century. The world's great rising power, the People's Republic of China, is headed for a demographic crisis. Like the United States and most developed countries, China has a birth rate that is well below replacement level. Unlike most developed countries, China is growing old without first having grown rich.
This is well understood by people who follow the news and who know about the issue. It's established. What it means is a secondary thing, but everyone knows this, except the general population still tends to go around talking about overpopulation and how there should be less children, and there's people who don't want to have children for that reason. I've overheard people bragging about getting abortions because of the population crisis.
Eugenics.
and that sort of thing. To each their own, make your own decision. But if you're making those decisions because you're misinformed, I mean, they admit,
Believing all this propaganda.
maybe I don't even want
That's the majority of people.
to step into that. It's just,
No, it should be stepped into because you have the average people walking around with this belief that they've been programmed with.
I call that the zombie apocalypse. That's what we have walking around right now is a bunch of zombies who think they're intelligently formed, and the only informed they've been is from whatever was the easiest that came their way. Their television set in the school system, propaganda, 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 and that's what they believe because they're dumb. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't fix stupid.
For decades that the world is just so burdened with human beings. And see, part of the problem with it is a lot of people live in cities. So their entire perspective is based on what's around them physically, and they think, oh, this city's got a lot of people, so it must be like this everywhere. Then you actually leave the city and travel in the world, and you realize there are large swaths of land that are completely void of all people. There's a lot of areas that are not populated at all. The figures don't match the belief, and it doesn't matter though. They're not going out of their way to try and correct this. I mean, this is not the belief that's being promoted. So the fact that this is on the front page of the New York Times is pretty mind-blowing. When I tell people overpopulation is a myth, I get all kinds of hate and trolls and people trying to argue with me about it. But if you actually look at the data, most all of the developed world is under replacement rate, including the United States. All of us are. All the countries are.
I mean, the thing is,
They're correct about it. Every single country is underpopulated, not able to replenish the numbers to keep up with the society. So the population of the society or the city is dropping.
people are walking around still talking about the population crisis that's been programmed in ever since World War II, especially, at least.
How coincidental. It all started right after World War II. How coincidental. United Nations, Mensa, okay, feminism, dividing the genders, dividing the races. Yeah, how coincidental. It just all started right after World War II all over again. Yeah.
Heavily for the last 50 years plus.
Before we talk about ideological penetration itself, let's take a look at the reasons why this form of penetration is so important.
And it's misinformed opinion that's now acknowledged to be untrue. And yet the purpose is there. This is about the power relationship. And as we go further into this, you've got to understand, admitting there's a global demographic.
I want to call something real quick. This is about the power of relationship. The power of relationships. Relationship. Yeah. Communication. People knowing what they're doing. A strong family unit. A man and a woman who actually took the time to know each other, even if it took them two decades to find their partner. When they did find their partner, they were very happy together. Yeah, they found true happiness, which is really success. That's what success is happiness. Success isn't materialistic items and money. No, that's not success. What you've been told success is not success at all. Never has been success. Success is true happiness. And if a man and woman actually took the time to get to know each other, and it maybe took 15, 20 years before you found your mate, when you did find your mate, or if you got lucky and found him in school during your time of growing up, but when you find your mate, regardless of what a time it took, and the reason I say 15, 20 years is because you might meet a few women along the way and it didn't work out because you wasn't really meant to be, but when you find that right woman, you're going to achieve real friendship, best friendship, companionship, happiness, and real love. And if that happens, well, then both guy and woman are very happy. They're content. And guess what happens when you have strong family units and people are happy and content? Oh, when tyranny happens and crap from above happens, they tend to rise up and they tend to say no. But if we're not happy and we're miserable and we're divided, then that don't happen, does it? No, because we become weak.
Dearth, that the demographic population is falling out like a crumbling mountain, is an acknowledgement that we're facing a return to global poverty. This is an age of austerity, and they've actually sold us on the reason for choosing to do it instead of accepting it as an inevitability is to help the earth, to save the earth, to address the environmental and ecological crises, when it's really a result of their pushing of this issue.
Yet we are increasing our population as if they were infinite. This fact is at the core of our environmental problems.
The number of people in the world has increased as much in the past 50 years as it increased in 1,000 years before.
Because this is about diminishing the individual and enhancing the collective, taking the power away from individuals and families and recollectivizing society. This is about taking global problems that require global solutions so that somebody can get global jurisdiction.
Right. Global problems that affected global people, globally, the people created by, well, the very bodies of people you're looking at right there. See, the problems were created for us. Problem, reaction, solution. Yeah. It just didn't accidentally happen, You just didn't accidentally have this happen. This all started really deeply after World War II. They already started moving on with their next agenda. And through baby steps since World War II, we have divided the genders, broke up the family unit, divided the races even further than they was divided, and we got everybody at war with themselves, fighting over fluff and stuff, and nobody willing to back up and use their brain. Okay, that's what we have going on here.
But how is it being sold? Not in that way. This should be a wake-up call.
Before I continue, I just want to point out, too, that they came out and said that China's population was going to be stabilized in 2029. That was last January 2019. Then they had to come out 5 months later and admit that actually it could happen in 2023. That is how quickly this is going on. Like we're going to see this happen in our lifetimes, that these populations in various countries are going to stabilize and start going down quickly because people are not having children. A lot
right here, no, this is the part that's funny.
of it is the propaganda, but a lot of it also is there's a huge issue with people being infertile.
See, this is the part that just floors me. I would agree that we have a problem with people being infertile, but not what they're telling you here. This is the cover-up. This is to cover up the big white elephant in the room. This is to cover up the division of the genders. This is to cover up the more, I would agree, nowadays is probably more 90-10 instead of 80-20. 90% of the female population are chasing after 10% of its men, leaving the rest of the men to die alone. Well, when you're talking about keeping up with the numbers to replenish your population as people die, and you have 90% of the females only wanting anything to do with 10% of the men, are in dating limbo, refusing to date, okay? When you have the genders at each other's throats the way we do, when we have millions of men all over the world that can't even get a woman in their life through no fault of their own, okay, but through the fault of social engineering and women falling for the lies as men fell for the lies, and going along with the social engineering which divided the genders. So you have millions of men who can't even get a woman in their life. Well, that's a lot of babies that will never be born to replenish a population with.
Due to a lot of these environmental pollutants, the things that are in the food, air, and water, stuff like that that's going on as well. So we've got...
See, this is what I'm talking about. They gave you the great cover-up. That's what I like to call this part, is the great cover-up. I'm not going to decline and say that what they're talking about here isn't happening, but I'm going to tell you it's not happening in the numbers. they're wanting you to believe. See, they're leaving out the big white elephant in the room. They don't want you to acknowledge that part. This is a eugenics program. Okay, this started right behind World War II. Seriously, right behind World War II. They lied to you all and been lying to all of us ever since then. They carry on their agenda in baby steps, as they always do. So this is the reason I wanted to do a reply of this, and I'm going to leave the link in the more. Because these two are going to clearly blow right by the big white elephant in the room. They're not even going to talk about that. They're going to give you every other reason and leave this reason out. The biggest reason, the absolute biggest reason there's fewer babies being born is what I just said. What Steve Hocus talked about, what Hell by the Dashboard Lights talked about, what I've talked about. Yeah, that's the real reason. What they're showing here for the numbers coming down, correct, but not for the reasons they're telling you. So yes, I'm not denying these things ain't going on, but what they're doing is they're hyperinflating them, okay? They're making them to appear to you to be the main cause. Okay, the main cause. No, not at all. When you literally can add up millions of men all over the world, okay, all over the world, having the exact same problems with Japan being on top of that list. Now, let's think about this. We have the same exact problems with genders fighting, not getting along, not being together, on top of people being infertile, okay? On top of that, okay? I mean, it's in your face. You could never sell the pickup artist industry stuff at all if the men were able to get a woman in their life. There ain't nobody to buy it. But it's still popular to buy. The young men are still buying into it. They're still giving their money away in hopes of what? Finding a woman. What happened in Japan? Have you looked? Yeah. What's going on in the United Kingdom? What's going on in Canada? What's going on in the United States? What's going on in Ukraine? Yeah. What's going on a global factor here? Yeah.
Two issues here, but I don't know how many times I've heard people talk about how there's just too many people and they're just parroting propaganda. They're not actually looking at the actual data.
Yeah, and
So,
China abandoned the one-child policy.
And even looking at the actual data, you don't know how much truth you're getting because they lie to us all the time. And once you lie all the time using fancy words of propaganda, then you really can't trust anything that comes out these people's mouths at all. And if they get mad because you don't trust them, they can go look in the mirror. When you constantly lie, you're not trustable. Sorry, don't believe anything you say. And if you told the truth and I don't believe it, oh well, your fault, not mine.
I forget the exact date, but because it was acknowledged, they officially went too far with it.
so he goes on to say, of course, China has grown richer, but even after years of growth, Chinese per capita GDP is still about a third or fourth the size of neighboring countries like South Korea and Japan. And yet its birth rate has converged with the rich world much more quickly and completely, which has two interrelated implications, both of them grim. First, China will have to pay for the care of a vast elderly population without the resources available to richer societies facing the same challenge, which is all of them right now. Second, China's future growth prospects will dim with every year of below replacement birth rates because low fertility creates a self-reinforcing cycle in which a less youthful society loses dynamism and growth, which reduces economic support for would-be parents, which reduces birth rates, which reduces growth, ... rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and this is a problem that all Western society is facing, as well as the East, that there's not enough money to care for the aging population, hence tax problems and so on and so forth. But it's even worse in
I love it. There's not enough money. There's not enough money. Hold on. Money's not being backed up by nothing. Money's just being poured out another human being's anal, excuse my language, and being printed at random. So if there's not enough money in a system that just prints it, that would be deliberate. That would be another human being making sure people don't have. That would be evil. That would be eugenics. That would be what you have allowed to happen to you. You become depending on the tool that they're using to destroy you with, money, the root of all evil. And they're using it to destroy you with. So here's your population going down as you're seeing it all over the place.
In China and other Asian countries, because they have a quasi-formal structure where traditionally for thousands of years the siblings split the cost of caring for their parents when they aged. And for a long time, it was very common for Chinese families to have 4 siblings. They split the cost of caring for the parents. But in the age of the one-child policy, it puts all of that burden on the one child. So they're less likely to have the extra money to start a family and sustain a new generation. It's a whole spiraling issue.
China is now conducting an intensive family planning campaign. The government encourages late marriages and small families. Barefoot Dr. Xiao Shu delivers a once-a-month birth control pill that is being tested on her commune near Shanghai. Chinese factories in Shanghai produce more birth control pills than any other country in the world. Vasectomies and tubal ligations are encouraged for parents.
You can tell how old that clip is, can't you? Yeah, that's like this is not new. Okay, but you see what I'm saying? I'm not going to really play this any further. I'll leave the link for you in the more. Okay, because this is Truth Media's video. Okay, these two are employees of the establishment. There's no doubt about that. Okay, but I'm not going to take away the truth that they are telling from them. I think they do tell a lot of good truth. Okay, that's vital for us to hear. But they also steer you down the rabbit hole because this is what they're paid to do. And this is exactly what they're doing here. They're leaving out the big white elephant in the room. They're not talking about incel or TFL. They're not talking about all the women that are, well, creating this problem for men through social engineering. They're not talking about all the women in dating limbo. They're not talking about the major reason. What they're doing is leading you to believe all these other reasons are the major contributor when they're actually not the major contributor at all. Because all you got to do is use reality. When you get millions and millions of men all over the world, all saying the same thing and all going through the same problem, these men are not reproducing, which means people that are dying off ain't having replacements, okay? And when you got a low number of women chasing a high number of women, I'm not going to say in reverse here, a high number of women chasing a low number of men, then there's no way in hell you could keep up with the replacement rate. 10% of the men to 90% of the women will never, ever, ever be able to keep up with the population replacement rate. So it can do nothing but go down. It's been deliberately done. It is the core of NWO, the core, okay, of NWO, and fighting all the other things of NWO will never defeat NWO because the core keeps growing back. Destroy the core, but nobody wants to do that because it's too personal, right? Yeah, it's too personal to talk about that. But anyhow, I just had to get this out there and throw this in your face because you're not going to see them tell you anything about the big white elephant in the room, okay? But they are going to help us confirm what we already know. And the numbers I don't trust, but at the same time, I already know that we already know this is true. The population is going down on a global scale. On a global scale. And it's not all because of what they're showing you. This is like a mask to cover up the big white elephant in the room that they're refusing to talk about once again. With that being said, I'm out of here.